I was going to say in tuveyhun, and I'm going to come back to that word there for poor, we've got ripe, which is tuv. The EY sound genders this word feminine. It's the same as the ta at the end of a lot of words, and what that means is something that is a latent, or you could say a potentiality becomes activated, is the best way you can put that in modern English. And then the hun at the end means all of you who. And you know, there's one thing that's intriguing in the Beatitudes, that if you don't read Aramaic, you won't see it. You won't see it in Greek, you won't see it in English, is all but one of, well, actually, 8 Beatitudes, he says tuveyhun, which means all of you here. One of the Beatitudes, he says tuveyhun, which means that he looked at one person and said it directly to that person, intriguingly. And then there's another one that actually doesn't have tuveyhun in the beginning of it. But I'm doing this in English so you'll see it. If you look at the back, grab my business card back on the CD table and flip it, although you won't be able to pick it out, but I can point it to you. I actually show a copy from the ancient Aramaic Khabouris manuscript that shows 2 little dots that basically show up right here between what in English is the M and the S. Now what's intriguing is the reason that this Aleph, Beit, this Estrangela style of writing was written was because prior to that point they didn't use phonetic markings to record the teachings of Jesus, meaning no vowel sounds. And they had big problems with that, because without vowel sounds the word changes. Okay? Now if you have MSKN together, let me hear you pronounce that MSKN as a word. Every single person in here said miskin. Okay? Now when you put those there, it changes it from miskin to maskin. Now let's talk about that just for a second. This is just the first Beatitude. Now, there's 2 sets of meanings. Actually, there's a couple different meanings that all really mean the same thing. Miskin. Now, we've got poor. Miskin, if you have it with that flat I sound, miskin means poor, as in lacking. When Yeshua would talk about give your stuff to the poor, he would say miskin. M-S-K-N in English. And that's what you say naturally without a phonetic marking. But when you add that into masculine, this is what that means, okay? Let's say you've got a wallet and you've got $6,000 in it and you've just got here to America and you have no job and your country is in civil war and your family was killed off. And here you are, everything you own is in this wallet. You don't even have a suitcase. And you're standing in New York City in the middle of the night in an alley, the same alley that you heard a crack a couple minutes ago, and all of a sudden a guy comes up behind you and someone grabs the $6,000 out, and you turn and he's way too far, you can't catch him. He's already turned the corner, you don't even know where he is. Every single possession that I had is now gone. I'm what? I'm poor. But I want to give you what that means in Aramaic, rather than poor as in lacking. I've got a wallet, I've got $6,000 in it, and I open it up, and I take that $6,000 out and I put it in my pocket. The wallet is now what? Empty. Everybody breathing? Empty in spirit, which means not poor as in lacking, but empty as in open. That word empty, maskin, also means home or sanctuary. The word spirit in Aramaic is ruhah. Spirit is a concept that the first century Aramaic mind would have had no clue what it meant. It's a Latin term. Spiritus is a Latin word that's gendered masculine, meaning that it's a physical thing. And we spend our lives trying to find spirit, yet again, in the words of St. Francis, what you are looking for is what is looking. Spirit and or breath in Aramaic, ruhah, is feminine. Not poor in spirit, but empty and open, and home in breath, spirit, energy, magnetism, cosmic expansion, the eternal forces of the one. Now, going even deeper in this, being feminine, it means this as well. What do I feel on my arm right now? That's what? Breath, right? In John 3, Nicodemus and Yeshua are having a conversation, and Yeshua says, you must be reborn of water and spirit, is what we're told in the King James. Now, intriguingly, in Aramaic, what he says is maya and ruhah. Maya, water, literally does not mean simply water. It means the great flowing expanse. It's at the end of Shemaiah, which is the word heaven, which is also the word sky. And ruhah, he wouldn't have said breath and spirit. He probably would have gone breath or water and spirit. He would have said water, maya, and Because in the first century, spirit and breath were not two separate things. Spirit didn't exist in their mind because what we now think of as spirit as separate from breath at that time was simply ruhah, which is breath. Now let me say one more thing. In the first century Aramaic mind, what you feel on your arm, that's spiritus. That's a masculine physical thing that we now call breath. Is everybody breathing? In Aramaic, it wasn't what I felt on my arm that was breath. That's hot air. In the first century Aramaic mind, breath was not the hot air that moves through my lungs. It was my feminine perception of its movement. It wasn't a thing. It was the experience of this. That's what ruhah is. And when you're empty in the expansion and the contraction of breath, spirit, energy, insight, growth, whatever it may be, that's what it meant. It didn't mean hot air on your arm. Is everybody clear? That's why we're out there looking for spirit. And as an example, I asked the question, will science ever find God? People are like, oh yeah, the superstring theories and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that's interesting. Because quantum theory says that as you observe, you create, which means that whatever they're finding is them. And what they're not realizing is they're looking for what's looking. What they are looking for is what is looking. God is not thing, God. And that's a concept in Aramaic that it doesn't exist in Christianity. Allah, the word for God in Aramaic, means absolute only being. Interesting. You've got the ah sound, which is alap, which means everything, lamed, which means movement, and ha, which means breath. The one lives and breathes within itself. Allah. And that's you. Is everybody breathing? If you ever feel like you're not getting something, let go of trying to understand it and just keep your breath moving. And what needs to happen will happen.
If you look at that Pentecostal experience where all kinds of awesome things happened and the tongues of fire upon their heads, the Greeks tell us that Yeshua breathed on them. That's not what it says. It says he breathed them. He showed them how to stay connected to that one holy breath. And you'll watch people in trauma, and the first thing that they do is cut themselves off from that whole breath. And when they cut themselves off, they literally cut themselves off from the eternal forces. Now they're locked within their own parameters. That is, what is their life experience and what's in their genes. You look at that story about the sins of the fathers are passed down to 3 and 4 generations. What are they talking about? They're talking about the energy patterns. And when we're locked in, the sins of the father are passed down to 3 and 4 generations. Anybody remember the second half of that passage? It says, yea, of those who hate me. It's not hate in terms of a love-hate relationship. It's those who are separated from the active presence of love in which we live, move, and have our being. And the way you separate yourself from it is by holding your breath. How many people remember them telling stories about you when you were 2 and you'd hold your breath until you turned blue and passed out? I've run into hundreds of people that's been their experience. And they spend most of their lives cut off from that flow that's designed to come through them. And they live in this intellect, in this 9-bit mind. Don't disturb my state of belief, because I already know. If you're in pain, you don't know.
You would have a much more accurate understanding of first century Aramaic teachings if you were to take the Jesus teachings and just pencil out the word spirit and write the word breath above it.
Yeah.
If you do that, just try it with one of those green Bibles, the Gideon Bibles you get, either on the urinals or in the drawer of the hotel room, and cross out spirit and write breath above it. Now, this is that phrase from, is it John 20:22? Jesus breathed on them. This is great theology because Jesus has all the power, just like Horus and all the ancient Egyptian guys, and Dionysus and Osiris and Mithra. Napak lahun, if it said this, I'm doing this in English so you'll see it a little more clearly. This lamed, which is this, I told you it means movement. It means on, toward, or at. Now this is something that in modern Aramaic scholarship, a lot of them don't even know that these two somewhere around 1700 years ago became interchangeable, the lamed and the bait, in terms of a prefix. This means on, toward, or at, the l sound. So if it was napak lahun, it would be he breathed on them, or at them, or toward them. But what it actually says in Aramaic is napak bahun. Now, bah means with, within, or through. Not he breathed at them, on them, or toward them, but he breathed with them. He breathed them through. That's a whole different thing. Not him having power that he breathes on them, but what happens, this is after the resurrection and he's standing in front of them, if that actually happened. I'm pretty sure that if a guy that I knew all of a sudden, and I saw hanging on a cross, and I saw his dead body, and all of a sudden he's standing in front of me, I'd probably stop breathing. I don't know if I would today, but I would say the average person would probably catch at least a little bit. If there's like I said about Minnie Pearl earlier, if Minnie Pearl walked in the back door, I probably would do a little bit of a, so. Are you getting what I'm saying here? This is about...
What's your relationship with Minnie Pearl here?
I love Minnie Pearl. We are in the South, aren't we? You see the difference here? Now here's what are the problems here is, the one problem we've got is that in modern Semitic scholarship, it's not even acknowledged that these two had separate meanings, with, within, or through versus on, toward, or at. So if a modern, many Aramaic or Semitic-based scholars translate, they don't know the actual first century difference between the two, and they become interchangeable. And all of a sudden the message changes entirely, just because of a single letter.
Has anybody here ever been with someone the last 48 hours of their life when they were experiencing a non-crisis death? Anybody ever been with somebody? What did they do in the last 24 to 48 hours? They started to breathe like this. They connected in a whole breath, and then they'd hit a place called a still point, where they'd stop breathing altogether for a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, until their lips start to turn blue. And then they'd go back and they'd do that breath. I think that the person who's getting ready to leave their bodies intuitively knows they need to reconnect in order to process out the garbage that they're carrying with them and not have to take it with them. We're looking at and clarifying the original Aramaic terms in the teachings of the man named Yeshua in particular, although not exclusively, in order to understand a thought system and a healing system that is disappearing from the planet. And we're looking to restore that first century thought system that has just had such longevity, even in distorted forms, that when we get back to the original, it just opens a whole different game. So we're delighted that you're here, and Dale Allen Hoffman is a local Aramaic scholar, probably the most practical scholar on the planet that I know of anyway, and he's going to open with the Lord's Prayer. And
to set the tone. Yeah. We did this, anybody here last night? I'm going to come down here. What we're going to do is we're going to tone a sound together, which is the first word of the Lord's Prayer in a Far Eastern dialect. If you're in the West, it sounds more like abvun or abvunach, depending on where you are. If you go further into the East, it starts sounding more like awun or aun. We're going to do the aun sound. Say that once, aun. Aun. It's kind of like om, but there's an N at the end. Say that one more time. Aun. Now I'm going to tone this sound one time, so you know what I mean by toning, without talking about toning a lot. Toning is essentially, just as a quick description, you're basically taking a sound that's normally sacred, really it could be any sound, it doesn't even have to be a word, and you're elongating the vowel sounds and allowing it to come through as deeply as you can in the present moment. It's not singing or performance, it's different. This isn't about having a great quality voice, it's just about having an open quality heart and presence in the moment, and the sound will take care of itself. So I'll tone one time, and then we're going to do this together 3 times, and then I'm going to go into the prayer, okay? And I'm just going to go into the prayer in Aramaic tonight rather than also English, okay? And you'll understand after this, you'll feel it. You'll feel why I did this to begin, okay? So just listen to this first tone. over the N, which is the letter nun, at the end of the word, because all you're going to be doing from that ooh is just taking the tip of your tongue and resting it on the back of your upper teeth. Remember that sound. Don't forget that one, okay? So let's do Arun 3 times. Let this last one ring out, okay? Wide open, far beyond the expanse of this beautiful building. Last one. Now just be aware of your breath and be open. Avund Voshmaya Nit Kadash Shmach Tete Malkutach Nehwe Tivyanak Aikana Voshmaya Ap Be'area Hablan Lach Madasun Kanan Yomana Washwoklan Hobain Wach Dahain Aikana Dabhanan Shwakan Lachayavin Wela Tahlan Lenesiune Elapetsan Min Bisha Metul Didelaki Malkuthach Wahel Wateshbukta La Alam Amen. Amen. From this rooted earth may all my actions flow. And so it is.
Sweet. Thank you. One of the most basic teaching of so much of the Western world is that there's something for you to fear. And it's the ever-present Almighty that if you do some sort of an offense, then you're going to be punished for eternity. And so we hear an interpretation in the Greek translations, and if you look at the Greek gods were all about control and fear, and the atrocities they committed are amazing, and that's been transferred into the Aramaic meanings, and we're told to fear love. The Creator is love. And if you look at how bizarre a concept that is, you look back into the Old Testament, it says, fear is a commandment of men. Men made that whole game up. And you've got to start to question. You've got to come out of insane belief systems in order to truly function as a full human being. And the word that is in place of that fear is really to have awe. And there's some interesting research that's come out of Stanford recently, where they're researching the impact of awe on people. And what they're finding is that when people go into awe, when they can't process with their minds the way they normally do, and they are awestruck, that it transforms everything in them. It literally transforms their psychological state. It transforms the state of their health. It transforms everything. And so what is this state of awe? What do you want to, how do you move into that state of awe? And what's it really all about? Is it about doing the right thing for the wrong reason because we've been told if we don't do it we're going to be punished? No, that's a thing called propitiation. T.S. Eliot gives us a really easy way to understand that word, which is not very popular in our culture. And he's got a poem where he says, "'Tis the highest treason to do the right thing for the wrong reason." And you look at people who've been trained through fear, and they continuously work to do the right thing, not realizing that every time they work to do the right thing, they in fact are resonating a disease within their own cellular structures by doing the right thing. Trained through fear, fear being in the cell, fear being a disease to the cell, one acts through fear and ends up destroying themselves, wondering where all these horrible diseases come from when the root of the disease process is in the training of fear. And so Dale's going to talk about the I am and what that really means and how awesome it is when you understand it from the Aramaic.
One thing that I think a lot of people have heard is Moses in that burning bush and the I am that I am, which could be translated from Hebrew as I shall be that I shall be, I am becoming that I am becoming, I am flowering that I am flowering, I am fractally expanding that I am fractally expanding. Yeshua used a different word when he was talking about I am. One of the questions I get asked the most in the last 20 years is, all right, hold on a second, I get everything else you're saying, but there's one hook I still have. Usually it's John 3:16 is one. We might get to that one a little later. But the thing I get asked the most is, what about when he says, I am the bread of life, or I am the way and the truth and the life, or I am the gate, I am the good shepherd, all these different places. All of those actually in the Gospel of John, incidentally. I put these up here on the board before we began, just thinking as an experiment maybe it would burn its way through the board or something. It didn't. This is something that's so easy and clear to understand, and it's literally not possible to understand except from the Aramaic perspective. It's not that it couldn't be said in another language, but something I talked of yesterday is there's a big danger in translation without experience. And when I say experience, I don't mean past experience. I don't mean having 30 years behind you with translation. I mean open experience now in the moment. Without Gilyana, the revelation, the unveiling, there's no chance of you really bringing something through, because it's only going to come through in the perspective of what your mind can hold or handle or comprehend. And any translation is going to be a dumbing down. It's just the way it goes. This is something that's so easy to understand. Right here, it's got three letters, Aleph, Nun, Aleph. Sounds like this, Anna, Anna. So if anybody knows the name Anna, someone with the name Anna, this is what Anna means, I. Okay? I. It could also mean I am, but it's a very specific, it only has one meaning, which is either I as in I Dale or I Dale am. If I'm going to walk across the room, I would say Anna. Technically, let me put it this way, in Aramaic, it tends to most often be pronounced, even though you can see that it's the same you can see that it looks like Anna. It tends to be pronounced as Aina or Ina, okay? Or even Inna. I'm going to show you why. Well, I don't know exactly how the connection happened, but I'm going to show you why that is in a few minutes, okay? It's something that's going to be more important after you see what I'm going to unpack here. Now, Aina, Ina, Anna, this sound, if I, Dale, was going to do something, like I say, I would say, Anna, going to walk across the room. You got that? Very clear. If Yeshua was saying, as an example, Ana Nuhra de Alma, I, Jesus, am the light of the world. Nuhra de Alma, the light of the world, or the light of creation. There's so many ways you can translate Alma. He would say, Ina Nuhra de Alma, I, Jesus, am the light of the world. But what's really intriguing is that in Aramaic, what's written on the page is actually this 2 times, not once. Now, you're about to learn a lesson in translation. If one Ina means I, what would 2 Inas mean? Us, we. Anything else? Who said it? I. Anything other than I would change its meaning. It's adding something that's not on the page. Do you understand what I'm saying? If you were to put two eyes next to each other and say we, in truth, what you're doing is changing what is written on the page. What would be literal is I. Okay? Now, there's a quote that I gave a couple of times last night from St. Francis. Take a breath. St. Francis of Assisi said, what you are looking for is what is looking. Not everybody's going to pick that up. If you're trying to understand it, you have 0% chance of understanding it. If you take a breath and let go, it's your only chance of getting that one. If you felt like if you don't quite get what I just said, then you got it, okay? So, I inside of the eye within the eye, not the physical eye, something behind the physical eyeball, but as an example, when you look in the mirror, that which is observing that reflection in the mirror is understanding that that's simply a reflection. The reflection is not what's real, nor is what it's reflecting. The only thing that is real is the observation or the awareness itself. Okay? I need you to breathe. Now, intriguingly, when you look at it like this, the eye within the eye, a good example of what eye within the eye is we talked a lot about babies and holding a baby in the first 20 minutes of life. That's inanna, I. Now that I say inanna, even though it looks like ana on the page, the way we pronounce this is, in Aramaic, inanna. One of them is masculine. Masculine meaning it's